Welcome. My name is Laura, and I will be teaching with David. He's our off-cam teacher, and you can see him in the chat. And we are delighted to be here with you today for lots of reasons. We are going to be talking about AP World History, of course, but we also have some late breaking news just for you. So let me go ahead and hop right into what we're going to be doing today, and we will be able to show you right on the slides exactly how your AP Prep should change based on the latest announcements from College Board. So let me go ahead and start this presentation for y'all. All right, so we are taking a look. As I mentioned, it's definitely going to be world history, don't you worry. But we do have some news for you all. We're going to actually hop down to here. And before, oops, heading past here. We have two different pieces of information we need to provide for you. So there are two pieces of the exam structure. If you came yesterday, thank you so much. We actually already talked about it. There's news though. Okay, so looking at what you've been prepping for all year, because you've been going to class, you've been doing homework, you've been learning. That's great. College Board still wants you to get credit, even though many schools weren't or won't be able to get through the last part of material, and many schools aren't going to be able to administer it in school. So how does this sound? So take a look at what there is right now. There's section 1 and section 2. There's a lot of content that's going to be covered in this amount in this space. How about, and this is coming directly from College Board, we are going to take what we have here and let's go ahead and cross off this part. Yep, this part. Maybe this part. Yep, that part. Okay, so what's going to happen? You are going to have a 45-minute exam for the whole thing. 45 minutes. You are going to take it from home. True story. And College Board even listed that you can use any device that you have. So whether you have a computer, you have a tablet, or even your smartphone, this will work. If you want to write the test online, actually type it out, you can do that. Or if you wanted to, especially if you're using your phone, you can actually write your answers and take a picture. Okay, so write your answers. Wait, what does that mean? What, we have no test at all? No, you do. It's a 45-minute exam. It is going to be free response questions. Okay, free response questions means that there are not, I'm going to go ahead and put that back up. There's not going to be a multiple choice component there. We think it might be short answer. It's only 45 minutes, so likely it's not going to be a super long essay. We are going to find out more and we will share it as soon as College Board lets us know. They also want to be very clear that they're going to be providing additional resources. So just keep everything open in your mind of what this is going to look like. So we don't know for sure, but what we're going to do today, because I mentioned we're definitely doing world history for sure. But we're looking at multiple choice questions. And then we're going to consider, okay, now that I've answered this multiple choice question, how would I have answered it if it was a free response? And yes, my dog's name is Eleanor Roosevelt. She's very happy and or upset that there's a squirrel. Let's say she's happy about world history. I mean, her name's Eleanor Roosevelt. All right, so big news, right? Well, what does that mean though? Because 45 minutes, not a ton of time. And we need to consider what is actually going to be covered. Because I said College Board isn't going to test what most schools either couldn't get to or won't be able to get to. So I get to take out my red line again. Let's just get rid of a whole period. We are going to have another section on 1450 to 1750 on Monday. So this is the first half of what we're doing. We have 3 high yield content areas, which means that there are specific parts of this time period that are important to know so that you can demonstrate your knowledge. So the first thing is Chinese exploration. So the Ming Dynasty is going to be particularly important in this time period. They decided to send out massive naval expeditions. And we touched a bit on this last time. Now, something that's interesting. So you see, we're doing 1450 to 1750. These dates aren't within that time period, but it is part of the age of exploration, because it's not like people were looking at their calendar and saying, oh, 1450, we've got new stuff to do today. This is the age of exploration. So know that a lot of times, especially on the exam, you're going to see circa. So that means around. So approximately that's when that started. So Chinese exploration really kicked it off. And then you'll see on my next slide, other people joined in. So there were 3 particular reasons why the Chinese decided, oh yeah, we need to explore. And these reasons are very different from a lot of the reasons why Europeans got involved in this. So when you are thinking about this age of exploration and you're thinking about different people, different places, you want to consider how they are similar. So they both went out, they had massive naval expeditions, true story. But what was different about this? So the last bullet point in particular, impressing foreign people, is something you want to keep in mind, because that was not one of the major factors for Europeans. European exploration, in contrast, so unlike the Chinese, really was about money, wanted money. Remember that's really the motivation there. And Spain and Portugal really led the way in terms of finding lucrative ways to build up, and indeed they wound up building up their prestige too, but it wasn't a primary thing. They were really trying to build their coffers. They wanted money. It was all about the money. So when you are thinking about the age of exploration, not only are you going to want to understand what really made all that money and how it was so super profitable, but also what key people were integral in making sure that it was a great success for the Europeans. So again, we're talking about that side of it. And studying history isn't about trying to come up with the good guys, the bad guys. It's more of understanding how this all happened. So thinking about that and how different groups of people affected each other is going to be important, especially if you're answering a free response question. So speaking of free response questions, we have a multiple choice question that we're going to work on. For today, I made sure that you have either the text or the image right next to the question, so you don't have to feel like you can't see both. So we have that available for you. And we're doing this in a couple different parts. So the first thing we're going to do, let's take a look at this map. We're going to consider what we have here and what it's trying to demonstrate. So we have Portuguese trading posts. It's within the age of exploration. And it's not just a couple. It's extensive trading posts. And hopefully, since you're studying world history, you can recognize which parts of the world you're in. They went a long way and established quite a bit of trading in this time period. So we're going to answer this multiple choice question. And then what we're going to do is we are going to discuss how this would be answered as a free response question. So your first task, we're going to just put each thing in a bite-sized piece. So first bite-sized piece, I'm going to give you 1 minute to look at the extensive number of trading posts, read the question, select an answer, and then we'll discuss the answer and how to answer this as a free response question. I'm going to go ahead and get up my handy dandy timer. You're going to have 1 minute. All right, so let's check in with how you're feeling about this question. You had enough time to take a look at it, consider all of the answer choices, which is going to be a little bit different from free response questions, but we're starting with what you already know how to do. So starting with that, the correct answer is the spread of technological advances from the Middle East to Europe. So let's pause before we move on to how to answer this as a free response. So the first question is, were you able to get to the correct answer? If you were, that's great. You're ready for the next step. If you weren't, you want to consider what your action steps should be, because practicing is only helpful if you're able to then get even better, or if you answered it correctly, to replicate that performance. That's what the goal of practice is, whether it's test taking or a sport. So if you were able to answer this question correctly, make a note of it. And this can be an area for you to perhaps look at a question stem more carefully, because even if there are answer choices, there are question stems. So were you confused by what they were asking? If yes, you're going to want to practice reading very carefully. If you're not really comfortable with this time period or this particular group of people in this time period, make a note of that, because you have time before the exam. All right, so knowing that the correct answer is the spread of technological advances, that's something that you can select from a list. If this were a free response question, which means it doesn't have any answer choices, something that you want to make sure you are very clear about is the extensiveness that is shown in the map. So if you happen to just answer why Portuguese traded, they wanted money, that's true. I actually just said that, but it doesn't have anything to do with the map. So if you're given a stimulus-based free response question, you need to tie them together. So take your knowledge of the Portuguese, of their trading, and marry it with the map. So what you want to make sure you do is carefully consider, after you've written your response, if you have everything in it that you want. Because when you write a free response question, once you write it down, it doesn't disappear. You still have it in front of you. So use that and use what you wrote as your response as a check to see, okay, wait, did it answer the question specifically? And did it tie in the stimulus? Because it's not just there for fun. They just put it in because it's pretty. They put it there so they can use it as evidence, because they do want you to think like a historian. The next thing we're going to look at is text. So we were just looking at a pretty picture. As I mentioned, it wasn't just for show. Here we have a primary source. We are going to look at just this text and talk about it before we go on to the questions. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a minute and 30 seconds. Go ahead and get started. And I apologize, my screen looks different. Let me go ahead and restart that for you. All right, go ahead and get started. And as you're finishing up your reading of this, I'm going to go ahead and underline some key components. All right. So primary source documents, and this will likely be included on this newfangled version that College Board announced, which David can help you out with if anybody has questions. Feel free to chat directly to David. He's there to help and is just as big of a nerd as I am. But mostly we're focused on what you need. We want to help you. Primary source documents, you're familiar with them. You've been studying them all year, are not always the easiest to read. The good news is you don't actually have to translate them from whatever language or interpretation the person came up with to begin with to modern day, especially not text speak. That would take forever. What you do need to do is pick out the important components. And so this is really introducing the idea that the English became very powerful. And it says why by commerce. So as I mentioned before, the goal was to get money. They did a good job. And then the other thing to consider is, just like in the map, it was extensive. So far distance parts of the globe. Those are the key components. The rest of it, you don't have to know exactly what he said in each part of every sentence. So that's the good news. I'm going to go ahead and clear that off. And we are going to take a look at the first question. So there are multiple questions that go with this, and actually it tells you at the beginning. So question 2, we're going to skip over that one, but we're going to go right on to question number 3. So question number 3, we're going to give you 1 minute. Go ahead and take a look at question number 3, and then we'll talk about how this could have been a free response question. Okay, so this is the type of question that does require specific information that you will have already learned by the time you take the test. If you aren't super comfortable with it right now, so taking a look at what the correct answer is. Answer choice A, if that didn't seem like the perfect answer for you, you still have time to study. What you do want to consider though is how you can work this into a free response question. So likely a free response question would be a mix of this question here and the previous question. That's why I skipped over it. So the previous question, I can actually tell you, was about how the passage can best be understood in the context of which of the following, and you needed to pick out there, and I'll write it down for you. It is the European states establishing trading post empires in Africa and Asia. Okay, so that's the correct answer to the previous one, and actually I can give you the question too. I'll actually just put best described, best understood in the context of da, da, da. That's the important part of the question. So there's 2 pieces here. Oh, let me go back. So the reason why I did this, I had you answer this question because I want you to marry the two ideas, and then we'll look at that third question, the third in the set. It's question number 4. Okay. So putting this all together, let's say you were given this stimulus and you were asked to discuss how England impacted the world at this time. Okay, so there's 2 components. You can say that England was one of many European states that established trading post empires in Africa and Asia, and some of the goods that were imported from the Indian Ocean region were teas and spices. So thinking about how to incorporate that all into a response, it depends on you as a learner. Do you work best if you write everything out and it's a whole paragraph and you memorize it that way? If yes, practice it using that technique. Are you better at flashcards and you want to see a flashcard of important things to know about England, and then on the back it can have all the pieces? Or are you really visual and it's triangular trade? So you can actually draw a picture, or I can just go online and print out a worksheet that I'm sure someone's already created and fill it in to remember where things were moving, why things were moving, and who was benefiting from it. So there's a lot of different pieces. We're going to know more from College Board, so we'll be able to better help you prep for the test. That's what Kaplan's best at. We really know how to do test prep, and we're going to help you with that. So like I said, we're going to definitely let you know as we learn more. But right now, your goal, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to take the practice that you've already been doing with multiple choice questions and taking it one step further. So I certainly hope you're going to join us throughout the rest of next week so we can help you do just that. We're going to finish out this final question set with just one more question. And you're going to go ahead and answer it, and the timer is going to behave. Go ahead. And this is the final question set for this high yield content area. We have 2 more areas. All right, let's check your answer. So we are highlighting answer choice D. That is the correct answer. This really draws upon your content knowledge. So Europeans weren't the only people out and about at this time. You want to consider what was happening elsewhere, and we're actually going to cover this in our 3rd high yield topic area. The Ottoman Empire, kind of a big deal. So just be aware that the Europeans were exploring in the ways that were most helpful to them, but also trying to avoid conflict. So if you think about the map of the world, where people were headed, it mattered who had power, and with anyone, you always want to do what's probably going to be the easiest and get you the best result. That's what's happening here. This wouldn't necessarily be within the same pre-response question as we did before, how I married those 2 questions and put them together for you. So I kept this one separate, but one thing that you can take away from this is that understanding where people were moving at the time and what their motivations were, as I mentioned at the beginning, that's what's really going to help you with questions like these, whether they're multiple choice or free response. All right, so you did an awesome job. We've covered quite a bit already today. We talked about these late breaking changes, and we also covered our first content area. So moving on to our second content area, we have the Columbian Exchange. So age of exploration got people out there, trading posts were established, different groups of people figured out how they could make a lot of money. And then things started being exchanged, moved in vast quantities, not always for the better, depending on which group you were. And it was a very specific pattern. So if you want to bolster, if you want to support a free response question with details, key there, putting details is really helpful. You're going to want to know which way things were flowing. So since it was the triangular trade route, having a map of that and understanding that, or just thinking of it as you do here in this table, inflow, outflow, that's fine too. However, you can wrap your brain around exactly what was happening, who was moving, and what was moving, that's going to make a difference for this particular high yield content area. In particular, silver and sugar are really important. And actually, David was explaining yesterday what drove the silver trade. There was a fantastic image about that one. It did turn out to be the most abundant American precious metal. And as David pointed out very aptly, it was responsible for stimulating the global trade network, not surprisingly. Spain was a big deal because they did control two of the areas richest in this very desirable metal. Sugar cultivation, equally important in shaping the change of the world, was a little bit different. So you want to think of silver and sugar as both being very important, but in way different ways. So because sugar wasn't easily cultivated, you couldn't just, oh, I'm just going to grow some sugar. It essentially changed not just goods and services, but people's lives, and the course of history was changed because of sugar. And then because smallpox, so we saw in the previous slide, diseases were also exchanged. Because native populations weren't available to grow sugar, that's where we wound up seeing masses of people being moved from current locations over to cultivate sugar. So that's how that happened. A lot of this is cause and effect, and being able to understand those causes and effects, that's what's going to make your FRQ responses amazing. So taking a look at this primary source. So this is an image of a primary source. You want to know what the time period is and what it's showing. So we're going to take a look at this question. We're going to answer it as a multiple choice question, but then we're going to talk about it as an FRQ. So the timer is going to behave itself, and I'll go ahead and give you 1 minute. You may begin. All right, we're going to do something slightly different with this question set. So I'm going to go ahead and reveal the correct answer. If you have any questions, you're welcome to ask David. But we're going to keep this, the use of forced labor in the production of cash crops. We're going to keep that in mind. I'm going to have you answer the next question. I'll give you 1 minute to do that. And then we're going to talk about how those two pieces come together as the start of a free response question response. Go ahead and answer this one. All right, I'm going to go ahead and reveal the answer to this question. And then I'm going to remind you of what we had for the previous question. And the previous question was just asking about what the image was representing. And so that's the correct answer for a previous question in blue. So the use of forced labor in the production of cash crops. And also for this question, the role of sugar contributed greatly to the triangular trade networks. So as I said before, when you're answering a stimulus-based free response question, which is, surprise, what your test is going to be for this year, because College Board, everyone wants you to get college credit for what you've done so far. When you're answering that stimulus-based free response question, you need to explain what is happening and then also be very clear as to how it is supported in the image. So you just jump into saying sugar was very important. There was mass production of it and it contributed to the triangular trade networks because it was imported and then other goods were exported, and you have a whole beautiful response. That's a great answer that doesn't incorporate the primary source. So you have to state specifically what the image is depicting and how it plays. I mean, especially the triangular trade networks included moving people. So if you miss that key component, you're not going to get all your points, and we want you to get all of the credit that you deserve on these questions. So that's what we're pointing out here. So we're taking this multiple choice question format and then showing you how you can take those same skills and do an amazing job with the free response questions. I'm going to go ahead and delete this one. And we're going to move right along. All right, we have made it to our third high yield content area. After this, we're going to do 3 takeaways, and we're going to do practice questions in between. When you're studying, however you figured out works for you. I don't want you to revolutionize anything. It's like if you go in to take a test and you start doing something completely new, like taking it from starting at the end and go back to the beginning. Don't do that. Please don't do that. Just go with what feels natural, but consider how to incorporate some best practices. And that includes making sure that you answer practice questions. For right now, since we don't know for sure what those free response questions are going to look like, using multiple choice questions is totally fine. You want to incorporate them throughout your practice. And by practice and studying, I mean actually looking at information, thinking about what you already know, writing down what you want to look at again, and then doing some practice questions. And then taking it one step further and considering, okay, how would I have written this in a sentence or a paragraph? So there are a lot of key components to that, but David's right there if you have any questions about it. Not only are we world history experts, we're test prep experts, so we can definitely answer those questions. So coming back to our high yield content area number 3, we have the Ottoman Empire. They were mentioned in a previous question because Europeans had to figure out how to best travel without getting into really a power struggle with other very well-organized groups of people. So some things to consider. Ottoman Empire, and we're going to answer some questions about the Ottoman Empire shortly. Considerable strength, but really it was the advances in technology that made it possible. So we looked yesterday, if you were here yesterday, we looked at other groups that didn't have as many advances in technology. It was earlier in time. Definitely the military might and gunpowder, that was considerable advantage for the Ottomans. And when you're considering different groups of people, you want to think about what they did differently than previous groups of people and how it then affected the world as the empire fell. So there are different components there. So looking at this particular picture, we have a primary source and we have a question to accompany it. So we want to consider how it's seen as foreshadowing one of those 3 events. And we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to have you answer this question and the next question, and we're going to put them together and consider how it would be a free response question. Go ahead and take a minute to consider this and pick out an answer. All right, so we're going to go ahead and reveal the correct answer for this. So this picture is actually depicting a specific event. So this is in 1453. Ottomans come in, they defeat the Byzantine Empire, which was Christian controlled. And there was a really specific reason why they were able to do it so effectively. And that is asked about in the next question. This one isn't going to take as long as the previous one, so go ahead and just take about 30 seconds to look through this, because we had just talked about why the Ottomans were so effective in gaining control of other people and places. So, as I mentioned before, gunpowder, really important. Looking at the other answer choices, it's actually not much of a consideration right now because you have free response questions. So going into this new type of exam, the 45-minute free response question type exam, you're going to already want to know what it was about the Ottoman Empire that made them so successful. And actually, that should be a recurring question. When you look at a group of people and their accomplishments, what made them so successful? How did they impact the people and places around them? What happened after they were no longer in power? Those should just be standard questions that you're asking yourself. So if you consider what you saw in the previous question, the fact that they defeated the Byzantine Empire because they had gunpowder and weapons, that actually strings together perfect free response. You are stating what happened, it's tied to the primary source, and why it happened. Let's go ahead and take a look at one more question. And actually, that one disappeared. Just kidding. We're going to look at the key takeaways. But actually, let me just back up one quick second. Okay, so this was part of a 3-question set. I included just 2 questions. I didn't want to run out of time. But as I was mentioning, the takeaway for this, so thinking about, okay, I'm practicing these questions. What do I need to remember when I practice more test-like questions? How can you clearly tie in what you've been provided in whatever the source is, whether it's text or an image, with what the question is specifically asking? And I know it's happened to me before where I've written what I thought was a really good answer. Like, I put a lot of thought into it. I gave details. It was compelling. And then it turns out I didn't really understand what the question was asking. And so knowing for sure what the question stem is getting at is really important. I don't know that I've left out a primary source, but that's another I know for students can be a challenge to make sure you incorporate that as well. So before you move on to the next question for any free response question, make sure you've checked your work and you have included everything it is that you want to include. All important considerations there. Okay, next up, we've got key takeaways. We have 3 for today. This is in the 1450 to 1750 range, and we have 3 for Monday. So because we now know that the test is going to be free response. We're going to spend some time on these takeaways so that we can think about what content you might need to review or what content you want to look at more closely as you are doing your own prep. Okay, so key takeaways. So for our first takeaway, this goes back to our very first high yield content area. So one thing that we did, all this information is coming from a book that I worked on. I actually had a lot of fun working on it. I know I'm a huge dork, but it is geared to help you figure out how much you already know before you just start reading a lot of stuff. So if you're not quite sure how comfortable you feel with the Columbian Exchange, one thing you can do is you can answer some practice questions and also take a look at a list of the key terms and see how many you can come up with even a sort of definition in your mind. So if you can pinpoint the location and the time period, and also if it's a person, how they affected whatever's happening in history at the time, then you can say you feel pretty comfortable. If you look at it and you think, oh man, I probably had a test on this, but I don't really remember, keep track of that and you can study it. So this high yield content area is extremely important. Knowing that there will be FRQs, you want to have plenty of relevant details to add to your free response. You want to put in specific, concrete examples that prove that you can connect the primary source with the question stem itself. So in particular, you want to think about, for this one, the diseases, crops, people, and cultures. And actually, I'll go ahead and put that. So you're considering new diseases, crops, people, cultures. So if that sounds like something you feel super, super comfortable with, great. You can do some practice questions, especially as College Board releases some more information about that. If you don't feel super comfortable, I can tell you it's really important for you to know this about this time period. That's why it's a key takeaway. I mean, that makes sense. Okay, and actually I'm going to, perfect. Now we have technological improvements. All right. We were talking about the Ottoman Empire, weren't we? What technological improvement was particularly instrumental for their success? Can you recall? We were just talking about it. We even had a question about it. Can you guess how they were able to be such a mighty military force? So before you, feel free to go ahead and enter it into the chat. I'm going to go ahead and add shipbuilding. And then I bet you're thinking it. Yay! Awesome! I knew there was a brave soul out there that was going to say, you know what? I did hear it. I did know it. I know it. I'm going to get these points on the test. Yep. Gunpowder. Gunpowder weapon technology. Yep. Perfect. So shipbuilding, gunpowder, those are the big takeaways. And what David's telling you is absolutely right. Don't just memorize the details. You got to go one step further and you have to connect all the themes. And we're here to help. We want to make sure you feel really comfortable. And our final key takeaway here is, it's definitely not good news, but also not news to you because you've been studying this. Okay, so we talked about silver. We know silver was a commodity that drove the global trade networks. For this particular key takeaway, it wasn't silver, it was some other key component, and we had a question about it and a picture. What was the crop that was shown in that primary source document? Do you remember? The crop that was shown in the primary source document. So we know that there was contact with people because of the silver trade, but there was one particular crop that because the indigenous populations had died, then vast amounts of people were moved. Yep, you got it, Austin. You win. Annalise, awesome. I really appreciate it. I know it's not easy. You don't know all these people and you went out on a limb and said it. Awesome. Yep, sugar. So because this very hot commodity it was desired, Europeans were willing to buy sugar. They didn't have anyone to cultivate it, so they needed to move vast amounts of people. And that's a really important thing to consider when you're thinking about how the world was changing and how people's entire lives were uprooted. Awesome. I'm so happy. Thank you so much. It feels great to be talking with you all. We still have 2 more questions, and this is a bit of an introduction into what we're going to be covering on Monday. So let me go ahead and get us over there. And I'm going to go ahead and clear out my drawings here. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing. This one has 2 questions. I'm going to have you answer each question, and then we're going to talk again about the free response and how you would use this to your advantage. So I'm going to give you a full minute for this one. I don't think you're going to need all 1 minute. So once you are done with it, you can start thinking about what maybe they're going to ask about next in the next multiple choice and how you can adapt that to a free response. I'm going to go ahead and put it on the board and go ahead and answer it. And if you know the answer, feel free to put it in the chat. So you may not have needed all of that time, but like I said, we're talking about how to take these questions and consider them as free response questions. And Annalise is absolutely correct. Yep, it's the Italian Renaissance. All right, so we have the answer to this question. We're going to look at the next question, and then we're going to talk about how to turn that into an FRQ. Go ahead and answer this question. Awesome participation in the chat. Clarissa, I am delighted to tell you that you are 100% correct. So now our task, and this is our last question of the day. So let's think about everything we've talked about. Oh yeah, big news flash. So that was really important for us to discuss. And also taking what you've already learned and your ability to answer multiple choice questions and turning that into a free response. So our previous correct answer, and you all did a great job with that one, was the Renaissance. I'm actually not going to type it because I'm a terrible speller. Let me go ahead and copy and paste. It's actually shocking how terribly I can mangle something. There we go, Renaissance. You may not even been able to read it if I had done it. I don't need to be an excellent speller though to be a test expert. And as a test expert, I can tell you that the best way to get all of your points, because that's the goal, right? At the very least, college credit, sure, but wouldn't a 5 feel good? You want to make sure you give specific details. You identify the document as being from a particular time period if you can. If it's not, and by time period, obviously it says 1490, but saying that it is an artifact of the Renaissance. And then looking at the picture itself, the fact that we're going towards scientific study, that is something to point out as well. You're not going to have all the other answer choices because it's going to be free response, but that doesn't mean you can't dig into the recesses of your mind and come up with specific details that then demonstrate, as David mentioned in the chat, a theme. And the theme was going from more religious thought to scientific study. Questioning, why does this happen? What can we learn if we ask this question? How can we experiment? I am so grateful to you all for joining us today. I am just floored that Kaplan happened to think of providing this prep for you at a time when we're getting this news that we can share with you and help guide you through it. I'm extraordinarily grateful you took time out of your day to join us, and that I get to be the person to help you through this. I am just really happy. I know, big nerd, but I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen there. Thank you once again. And definitely let us know. You can let us know in the chat, or you can always contact us through our normal channels if you have any questions. And stay tuned. If you want to learn some APUSH, we've got bio later on. If you're looking for AP World History, be sure to join us next week. Thanks again.